Hi, my name is Robert Chelle with Chelle Law, and I'm an attorney that assists physicians with employment contract and independent contractor agreement issues. Today, I'm going to talk about claims made versus occurrence malpractice insurance for physicians. So, what are the differences between the two types of insurance, and then maybe some things that you need to think about. So, first, most of the time, it's either going to be a claims made or occurrence policy. Sometimes, if you're working for a large hospital or healthcare network, they're self-insured, and there's different ways of doing that. But today, I'm just going to focus on kind of the two main types, maybe if you're in private practice, which is claims made and occurrence. So, first, an occurrence-based policy means the policy has to be in effect when the malpractice event occurs, meaning it doesn't matter after you leave the employer, if you need any additional insurance, you had the occurrence policy in place, something happened, you're covered forever. So that's an occurrence policy. A claims made policy means a policy has to be in effect when you're actually sued. And so this can cause some complications because your claims made policy will end when your employment with the employer is terminated, but somebody could still sue you for, most states it's a statute of limitations of 2 years. There are some exceptions for minors, but in this case, we'll just go with 2 years here. And so if your policy ends when you leave the employer and there's a gap in between the last day you provide care and the last day somebody can sue you, you need a gap policy, and that's called tail insurance. And that just simply covers the gap in between you leave the employer and the last day somebody can sue you. Now, for a physician, it's important that there is language in the contract that just simply says who is responsible for tail insurance. If you're an employee, 95 times out of 100, your employer is going to pay for your underlying premium. It just means how much it costs to insure you on an annual basis. If you're an independent contractor, it's very likely you'll have to provide your own insurance if you're just filling in or maybe doing some relief work. But if you are working for, let's say, a private practice, and then the contract states that you are responsible for tail insurance, let's just kind of go through what that's going to look like. So generally, tail insurance is around twice what your annual premium is. So whatever it costs to insure you on an annual basis, you would double that, and that's how much you'd have to pay for your tail. Now, the cost of insurance is specialty dependent. Some specialties have very high premiums, like an OBGYN, whereas if you're doing, primary care, it's on the lower end. So for, for some physicians, tail is not that big of a deal. Like an average physician, primary care physician may have somewhere between $6,000 to $8,000 per year for the malpractice insurance premium, whereas an OBGYN could be, 4 to 5 times that. And so in order to get tail, what would happen is prior to your last day of working somewhere, you'd have to secure the tail policy. It's a one-time payment, meaning you don't have to pay it every year. But it still can be a decent amount of money, and for an OBGYN, it could be an extraordinary, or at least a very large sum of money, $50,000 all the way up to $100,000. And so negotiating who pays tail is very important for some specialties, and it is negotiable. This is something that you can ask for with the employer. Now, if the employer is unwilling to pay your tail, some strategies that have been effective are tying a percentage of the employer paying part of the tail, tied to how long you've been with the employer. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you'll say, if I stay for 1 year, you'll pay for 25%. If I stay for 2 years, you'll pay for 50%, and then 375. Then if I stay for 4 years, then the employer will pay 100%. Some employers are okay with that because they, if you're with an employer for a 4-year period, they've made more than enough money off of you, and usually it's justifiable for them to cover your tail. That's one thing that's been effective. Another way of doing it is called nose coverage, and basically that just means your new employer pays your old tail. That's another thing that you can negotiate. And then lastly, if you're in a state and the insurance carrier that is covering you in one position, and then you move to a new position and they use the same insurance carrier, many of those carriers will just roll over your policy into the new policy, and therefore you don't have to pay tail insurance. So those are kind of three ways of potentially getting out of having to pay tail. So those are the main differences between occurrence and claims made. That price-wise, an occurrence policy is about a third more expensive per year than claims made, which is why most private practices use a claims made policy and then make their physician pay tail when they leave, just because it's cheaper. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions about your employment contract or independent contractor agreement, feel free to contact my law firm at the information listed below in the description. And I appreciate you watching the video. All right, take care.